Okay, I'm calling the meeting to order at 6 p.m. And the first item is to confirm that the meeting was properly warned.
Yes.
Yes, it was. Okay. And we have an addition or amendments to the agenda.
I would like a select board to sign the new amended version of the administrative assistant job description so that we can have that updated in our files.
Okay. You want to?
Can we do that straight away?
Sure.
If both of you have had a chance to read it,
Yes, I have.
Yeah,
so we can just sign it, the ink.
and you did a great job in putting it together. Thank you very much. So we have a quorum tonight. We have 3 people here. And so we're able to continue. So we have a public hearing, and it's a public review of and comment on the amendment to the Newfane zoning bylaw pursuant to Title 24, Chapter 117. So it took me a while to find it, but it's on page 1 of the Newfane zoning bylaws manual. So if everybody has that. So who would like to begin? Katie? Kate?
Bill and Jane, would any of the planning commission care to speak on your work?
Just, if you would just hit the things that you guys, just briefly bring the public up to date on what minor little changes that you've done to conform with Title 24, Chapter 117. So.
Sure, so I'll go ahead and Jane can interrupt me. This zoning bylaw amendment is done pursuant to a bylaw modernization grant that the town was awarded.
Excuse me for a second. Would you like to come over here and talk through the microphone here? And this way the camera can see you.
Sure.
Oh, Mike. Hi. Would you want to do that, or do you feel more
I
comfortable?
just have some stuff on my lap, I'll try. So better.
You want the chair?
Here,
Let me get,
sure.
let's get the chair. A lot harder than it's supposed to be.
Sorry, I'm sorry to make you do that, but
It's okay.
thank you. So I'll just talk to you
You have all
all.
the papers.
Everybody likes.
So the town was awarded a bylaw modernization grant, and the goal was to make the zoning bylaw to increase housing access. And the town asked the planning commission to work with the Wyndham Regional Commission on bylaw amendments that would do that. And we did that, and the proposed amendments are pretty minor. I will just run through this kind of a checklist of where there are changes. So it's clear these are the same changes that the planning commission adopted last year. The select board had kind of come along with us through them. But we had to restart the hearing process, but there haven't been major substantive changes. There's a great additional change, which is we have one consolidated document, but I'll go over that after. The changes are primarily, so in a few places in the bylaw, the change where 1 to 2 unit dwellings were permitted as of right. They were permitted uses in the village district, and that is changed to 1 to 4 unit dwellings, and that's in sections 211, 322, and 332. 5+ unit dwellings are now allowed as a conditional use, so that's with DRB approval in the village district and the rural district. There are some reduced building setback requirements in the village district. Childcare facilities are, that's section 324. Childcare facilities are permitted in village and rural districts, subject to DRB site plan review. That's in section 332. There are no longer additional like acre per dwelling unit requirements in the village district and rural district, and those are in section 324 of the village district, 334 the rural district. Building setback requirements for non-conforming lots are reduced. And there are some revisions to parking requirements. So there's slightly less mandatory parking, but in mixed-use buildings, it's kind of negotiated based on the amount needed for the uses. And the ADU, that is accessory dwelling unit, maximum size is increased. So you can build a larger ADU, sort of extra little separate dwelling or apartment or kind of addition as of right.
What was it from and what is it to?
It is
I'm sorry.
so I think it was from, let me not get it wrong. It is now the greater of 1,000 square feet or, here, I'm just gonna tell you exactly what it says. So right now, the new language is the ADU shall not exceed 40% of the total or 1,000 square feet. Okay. So that, and before I think it was 30%. So it's still, it's not building a whole, separate larger house, but it makes it possible if one has the space and the funding to make like a meaningful size other apartment or dwelling. And that's really the sum total. You guys feel free to chime in. Of the substantive changes, it looks very different because we have consolidated 2 prior zoning bylaw amendments that were not consolidated. One is there was, I guess, I don't know that any of us, Jane, you were involved in it. There was a bylaw amendment to add green burial language, and that had never been incorporated into the document, although the town adopted it in 2021. And in 2023, we adopted the new flood hazard and fluvial erosion bylaw amendment, and that's now in here, so one doesn't make a mistake or have to look for it separately. And the maps from the zoning maps have not been changed, but they've been incorporated as well. So everything's just in one place now, which is why it looks very different, but
I have a question that people have asked me, and it's a little confusing. So if you could clarify,
right.
When you say Newfane Village, do you mean just the village of Newfane, or is this including South Newfane and Williamsville?
It's a great question and a totally fair one. It's the village district, so it's Newfane Village and the Williamsville and South Newfane. That's like the zoning districts, which
so it's all 3. Okay.
That would be considered the main road, the paved main road areas in
They're the
each
ones
one of
that have
those?
village designations, I
Exactly.
think, versus like Brookside's on the map, but I don't think it has an official village designation.
And so rural would be for, because I don't know, I'm just asking, way up on Tinson Hill or Newfane Hill or something like that, or out on?
Pictures are in
It roughly tracks to common sense
There's a map.
understanding, but they are there's like 3 categories of, there's another, but 3 main categories of land use in the zoning bylaw, and it distinguishes between village district, which conforms to the designated villages, rural district, which is, like you go out of just the little designated villages, and then the resource districts, which are, some of the large forest tracts. And those maps are now in the same document, so you can see them.
So how many units can you go to rural, you said, up to 5?
With conditional approval. So it's not like you can just do it, get a permit automatically, but it's possible to build more and without adding an acre per unit for each of those. So whether it's a new building or whether it's just subdividing an existing building.
Because that's what the state's looking for now, right?
Yeah.
They're looking at making it so you can do that on a lot with a duplex, but you can actually go a little bit more than that too.
I think Newfane is more limited than some municipalities because we don't have public wastewater or public water, so that limits what's possible, and it also means that there are some state law requirements for towns with public wastewater, and we are not, those don't apply to us because we don't have that.
Right, but you can still put them on a leach field as long as it passes for it, right?
Of course, it has to do that for the state.
It was all that discussion about trying to make the existing villages have denser population for all of the things that come with being in walking proximity and having opportunities for folks who can't purchase 10 acres and build a house.
And this does that somewhat. You can't like come build an apartment building, in downtown Newfane, but you can, there's more flexibility to add more units. I think it makes sense, and it shouldn't have a big impact on the feel of the villages, but it should allow for more housing.
Do you guys want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that's the rationale, is to try to promote some more affordable housing. If someone has a big old house with 5 bedrooms, they can then turn it into 2 or 3 small apartments a lot easier without a lot of red tape. So it's just a form of encouragement.
When you add bedrooms, for example, to a house, that often means that you have to increase the size of your septic system. And that's a big expense.
And to be clear, this, like, all of the state requirements still applies. Nobody could say, well, the zoning bylaw says I can build a 4-unit building on a tiny lot that doesn't have septic.
No,
That's
of
like
course.
all the state laws still apply. This is just like what can be permitted and the
Well, at
conditions
least
for permitting it.
I think at least that gives you that chance, because
Yeah.
like I said, we have some land in towns, and that's what I've asked the state, and right now it's 1-acre lots, 5 of them for 5 houses. And they told me I can do the duplex, and plus with no zoning, I can do probably triplex places for, lower income housing. I'm thinking like the flea market down there would be a good spot for something like that, That would all pass for, the septics and the water and everything right there.
That's outside of the village designation,
Yeah,
so
but
it's just
that's
regular.
but it said something about rural and stuff, that's gotta be
Right,
rural.
yeah.
And projects can come to the DRB, they're like conditional review and other ways, or if somebody had a big project, they could come to the select board and seek a variance or change the zoning bylaw.
Since you're mentioning the flea market, there is a letter for correspondence from Billy Moss, and maybe I should read it now.
Thank you, Kate. It was perfect.
Pertains to the public hearing.
Is that just your regular business, or is that
No,
related to
this
public
is-
hearing?
This pertains to this?
Yeah, it's about,
What's that? As far as I know, it does.
Okay.
what's that?
Good question. As far as I know, it does pertain to that.
Okay, do you want to read it or I'll read it?
Oh, I will have to read it. Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah,
Let me just give it a second to read a little bit so I don't mess up.
Yeah.
Handwritten. I have to make sure I don't mess up a word.
this was written on
You
June
sure that
7th.
pertains to the public hearing also?
Did you catch Nolan's?
I did.
What's that?
Okay. I just make sure it pertains to the public hearing also, or else I don't know if it should be read during the public hearing.
Yeah, especially since correspondence is not on your agenda.
It's correspondence, but since we're talking about this, and I've
Sure.
understood that Billy was writing a letter in reference to what's going on,
Okay.
we might as well read it now, since if there are questions while you're here that we can answer.
This is to do with one very specific section. So I will open, try to find it. Where did I find it to?
What section is it in?
550. I'm not seeing very many numbers. There's the 6. 580, 560. Got it. Okay. Dear Newfane Select Board, I'm unavailable to attend tonight's very important bylaw amendment hearing, and I hope the Select Board takes time to consider my thoughts on subjects with property rights in mind. I've been to some of the Planning Commission's open meetings, and I feel that my concerns fell on deaf ears. Some meetings they didn't even show. Anyway, I expressed that RE Newfane Village area offered more available properties for 1 acre home building lots than they are proposing, such as north to the Legion Barn and Autumn Lee, and down to the south up Bruce Brook Road and to the Brown Road on Route 30. Also, I think that we all like the quaintness of New England villages with close housing. My other extreme concern is section 550 mixed uses, which is what I've opened up to on page 33 of the document. The entire cumulative development, including structures, driveways, and parking facilities, shall not cover more than 65% of the lot area. Again, I protested this to your appointed, sorry, every time I see PC, I'm not getting Planning Commission out of it. Your appointed PC members, and even at one meeting, the regional Wyndham Regional lady member was there, and she had never heard of such a thing. I believe that this particular regulation is illegal, punitive, and unconstitutional. The property owner is expected to pay 100% of the tax and can only use 65% of the mixed use. Another example, along with this new housing push, RE section 550.5, the entire cumulative development, including structures, driveways. Okay, that's the same thing. Does it intentionally mean that one who develops an ADU or apartment that receives financial awards must conform to this section, along with any home industry? Thank you for your time and consideration, and I hope these concerns are not falling on deaf ears. Sincerely, Bill Morse, Newfane. So, let's read that together.
Yeah.
Section 550 mixed uses. In designated districts, more than one compatible principal use may be permitted within a single building or on a single lot, subject to conditional use approval of section 212.5 and the following provisions. Each of the proposed uses is an allowed use, either permitted or conditional, within the zoning district, which is the mixed use, in which the mixed use is located. 2, the combined uses meet all applicable standards for the district in which the mixed use is proposed, including minimum lot size, frontage, and setback requirements. Regardless of the number of uses, the lot shall only need to meet the minimum lot size for the district in which it is located. 3, the mixed use meets all applicable general regulations under Article 4, including but not limited to sign and parking requirements. 4, the total amount of parking required for a mixed use shall be based on cumulative parking demand for each individual principal use, unless a shared parking agreement is agreed to by 2 or more users who can demonstrate that their parking demands are at different times, and that meeting the requirements will not jeopardize landscaping features the DRB deems essential to propose the development. 5, the entire cumulative development, including structures, driveways, and parking facilities, shall not cover more than 65% of the lot area. That is the primary concern. So, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, so I want to pull up, those are indeed concerns that have been raised. They are well taken. I want to pull up the red line in the prior draft to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn, but I'm pretty sure that the discussion we had is this proportionate requirement is not, was not one of the new changes. And I don't think that the planning commission is in a position to start making determinations about the kind of percentage of use, like their setback requirements. There are lots of requirements that limit what people can do on their property.
Mhm.
And I think that is the nature of regulations, right? We balance what an individual can do with how we live together. I think that if this is an issue the town wants to take on, it could do so, but I don't think that, that's a separate question from the kind of housing accommodation amendments that we made. And so indeed, the WRC didn't have a response to this, and it's something that if the town wants to or wants us to, we could look at more, but the part of the mixed use that the changes affect is just kind of loosening the parking requirements a little bit, which maybe makes it that much easier, but it's not a major change. And I think that, I think it's outside of the scope of what we did, just thinking about increasing housing.
Yeah.
I mean, it would seem to me that anybody with tenths of an acre in the village would be exceeding 65% just from adding any structure if they weren't just subdividing an existing house. So how does that even work?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Mr. Morse has brought up a really great issue, and he's brought this up a few times, and again, it's just kind of beyond the scope of this set of amendments, but the town by all means should consider increasing the village districts or the zoning that where we can build more. And this is something we raised with the Wyndham Regional Commission, and it was kind of like, oh, well, the state, like these grants and this project is really focused on village districts. And so that's something the town could take on, but the smaller lots, yeah, I think like at some point it would be useful to have this conversation like with the map and look what's really built and what's really possible and what we're talking about. That would work. So I think they are things that if the town wants to look at in more depth, we could, but I'm not sure they are.
Well, mixed use and zoning means you can use that in multiple different ways. So if you only have a 10th acre lot and you have a building on there, that means you can have a residence above it and you can have a store below it. That's a mixed use. It doesn't, the 65%, we can tackle that in taxes and things like that. I think that's a little bit different than what the changes that you've described and that I've read are pretty much strictly to deal with increasing housing, which is what the state wanted us to tackle.
Exactly.
So I'm not trying to discount anybody with questions about that. However, these changes if a business now can have an apartment above it, which would do what we're looking for, which is increasing housing in the village. Now it can be that can be now considered a mixed use instead of just a business. I don't see anybody realistically coming in and throwing up another building in the village areas. There's just not enough room. There's more room to take the larger, older homes and split them up and put a couple of apartments in there. But I don't see anybody slapping up a Quonset hut somewhere and saying, hey, we're now going to use this as mixed use and I have a machining shop in here now. So it just doesn't some of this does not make a lot of sense in the respect of being abused.
Well, to that end, does it gonna be eliminated? Does it make sense to stay?
So does what?
This one line, this one line, if it,
No, well, that's from I think that's
from the original, but
from the original,
if the editing process is such
and that
that,
might be state derived too, so I don't have enough knowledge on that about usage, I would say we keep it in this wordage. We don't change the wordage on any of this, and we do have a process where if somebody wants to come in and either challenge it or say something, we can, the select board and the zoning board can tackle that as they come along. And could get a variance or, you know, exemption or something of that sort. I just don't wanna see, this process hampered down by something that is, we'll absolutely take it seriously, but I don't wanna see this process hampered for another year and going through this. We're kind of under a time crunch
We are for this, you're correct.
for this, and it's very important. You know, the state gave us money to take care of this. We're trying to increase housing around here as best we can. Some places might not be able to do it just because of the septic. You know, Mike, you're more of an expert on water and septic and things like that, and construction. It just might not be able to happen, but we have to be able to give people the opportunity to give it a shot.
Right.
So we have to remove some of these hurdles that are in front of somebody saying, I've got a really big house, I just want to live above my garage and I want to do this, so now you can start doing that sort of thing. Okay, so I would like to keep these processes going as best we can, and if somebody has a very specific question, come up with it later and us tackle it very specifically where we could put all of our attention onto this. Because I would like to have, you know, Bill and Mr. Morris, you know, more in detail, and talk to me and say, hey, this is what and then I could get we could get information, and we could come in and go, okay, maybe it does need to be changed. Maybe it doesn't. But that's not what tonight's for. Tonight's for very much getting this moving on a path so we can, you know, we're under the time crunch from the state. And something like this, if the individual has a question about a use in the town, in the village area, and wants to use 68%, we can deal with that when it comes.
I think for specific property questions, a good place to start is with the zoning administrator and the DRB. Like the zoning bylaw sets the parameters. There are some instances of variance, but I think this is a question that is like a tip of a whole different iceberg in terms of how the town regulates and how the state taxes people.
Yeah.
That's just that's different.
And that would include expanding village districts. That's a completely different topic than even this, because this is about developing a property and the other is about expanding a village district. Not that it's not a wonderful, valid concern, it's kind of arbitrary where that stops, but.
No one has to do that.
Just the period of time between now and when you vote to adopt this, where the public can, you know, petition. I think it's like 5% of the municipality. You know, if they decide they have an issue with it, then it goes before the town meeting. So, I mean, it's not. This isn't it. There's time. And I wish there were more public here, but you know, if there's a serious pushback on this, then they have options to bring it before the whole body.
The thing I see too, like where I said you're adding more to like the rural and the villages for more apartments or whatever, housing and stuff too. Right now, that's not in them bylaws, right?
I think that like these are great things to take up, and this isn't like the last bylaw amendment. So yeah, we could then expand this.
You're adding that, so now it's in there, so when they look at the zoning, you've got that opportunity.
Exactly.
You know, like the parking stuff, you know, that can all be, you know, and I don't think he was trying to do away with what he was talking about. And, you know, just like you said, Billy Morris, I mean, there's probably not a guy that knows that thing any more than Bill Morris. He's probably read that 1,000,000 times, you know, over the years. And I said, you know, and I appreciate his opinion.
Mhm.
But I said by doing what you're doing, I think by looking at housing and all this stuff, where you could make it easier that, you know, say for instance, the flea market or any place like that, if it met the sewer and the water and all that, you could put some nice townhouses in there and stuff. And it would look nice, you know, it's, like I said, I've been looking at stuff, that piece up there, and I've seen some real nice ones, you know, and there is a need for it, so. But I think this does open it up to the things that we don't have on there now on zoning. Some of the stuff that you're trying to put into it.
I hope it like makes, it opens things up somewhat without creating big new issues. That's sort of, I think we worked pretty hard with the WRC to get it right there. I do want to say that I really appreciate Mr. Morse has like shown up to our meetings and participated, that there hasn't been huge turnout. So not to discount any of this, it's really valid. But I think the town can come back to it. It's not that hard to go through this process, but it's important to kind of get it right. And this, if you all move forward with this, it shouldn't preclude continuing to evolve, right? Lots of things continue to evolve. But these are really big, different topics.
Yeah.
Just want to be
I agree,
first
I agree.
I have a question. When, just logistically, when you're speaking about village centers and increasing the number of housing or apartments for people, where, I mean, I'm in Newfane, I'm in the village of Newfane. So I think about your proposal and I can't figure out where this could happen.
That's a whole other, yeah, it's tricky. I mean, this is,
truthfully,
it's a lot of why we didn't propose more, I think, that the state.
Because when we first moved here 25 years ago, or whatever it was, there were, at that time, there were several houses who were renting out part of their house to somebody who wanted, you know, wasn't buying a house but wanted a place to rent. So they had an extra room and a bathroom or something, and then they would rent that space out. They didn't build onto their house to make something bigger. They used what they had if it was a big house. If they have 3 bedrooms, for example, and they only have a couple living there, they have 2 extra rooms. And there were tenants who were living in the same home for years. So that's doable if somebody wants it, but I can't envision what this proposal is, like in the town of Newfane, except for Billy Morse and his.
Well, I mean, I would be like an example, if I wanted to make a mother-in-law addition above my garage, I'm right on Dover Road in Williamsville. This gives me the opportunity to say, okay, I can make up to 1,000 square foot apartment above my garage for additional housing, you know, to be able to, a mother-in-law or even somebody else, even a complete stranger, just, hey, here's a 1-room apartment, you know, so.
So if you would do that, and you would spend the money to build an extra room and a bathroom, maybe, I don't know. And then that person would move in, he would have a tenant, and then he would wait a year, according to this proposal, wait 1 year before he would get $3,000.
No, that's the different one.
So they're related because there was a large push to support housing, but the grant program sort of overlaps well with this, but is separate from the zoning bylaws, just like what the zoning administrator can allow people to do without, like when you
So
need a
you're
permit.
not dealing
So it's
with
completely,
that.
it's sort of, we've tried to thread the needle with like, you know, before my time, someone applied for this grant, let's do more housing, but in the village centers, how do you do that with what we've got? And the WRC made most of these recommendations. I think there are lots of pieces to the puzzle. This is, I can't speak for everybody, my own take is that there are things we can do to make incrementally more housing. We can make things better in kind of smaller ways that satisfy lots of people's desire to keep things the way they've been, but also let us have more capacity and create more housing. And this does that. This is not radical change, but it allows a little more without having to build a wastewater system or contemplate changing the village center designation. So
It's changing the rules enough for us to be able to start expanding incrementally. There's grant programs that go alongside this, but they're not attached to this. This is just modifying our standing rules to increase amounts. So it's not, we're not doing anything radical with this from 400 square feet to 1,000 square feet, or from 1 to 2 to now 1 to 4. So it's incremental increases. It's just changing literally the paperwork, correct?
pretty much, like you don't have to go before the DRB, you know, you can just get a permit for that 1,000 square foot
Yeah.
ADU or 3 apartments instead of 2.
How it used to read was only a 30% increase with an addition at any given time, which is pretty constrictive. So this is an improvement.
Yeah, it's great. I'm
So-
loving what I hear. So.
I mean, if your house was only 1,000 square feet to begin with, that means you would only be able to put in 333 square feet of addition at any given time, which is kind
That's
of a
a nice
bummer.
walk-in closet.
Yes, right.
Okay, I know you were getting short on time. If you have anything else to add.
I don't think so. Thank you all for, I know, especially for those of you who haven't been on this process with us for the last few years, thanks for getting up to speed on it. I know it's an effort, so.
I have
David Mullen, do you want
one last question for you, and it's only half of the question, so you might have to help me flesh it out a little bit. But I was trying to figure out how the fluvial zones affect more rural districts for existing structures and this process of adding extra stuff, and also for any new construction going forward.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say for some of the same, like our size restrictions in the village districts, they also all lie in or adjacent to like river corridors. So there's lots of other limits. And the flood, the river corridor and fluvial erosion zone, like restrictions on development, those apply to all new development. They don't obligate people to change or remove structures that are in the floodway, though I think what we know increasingly is that it's a good idea. But you can't, it limits what you can build in those areas. And I will say this is like editorializing, but I think they're also really smart and healthy. They're not huge limits relative to, we all know the power of flood water, but it doesn't, you know, this doesn't, you can't like build in a flood zone because you can build 3 units instead of 2 now. But the fact that part of it, they shouldn't really, they're kind of mutually exclusive. Sorry, that wasn't very good.
Well, that's okay. I like for the big rivers, to me that makes a lot of sense. Like all along the Rock River, we know what has happened there. And then you get to some of the smaller rivers, and it's, you know, the further up you get, the less water has accumulated before it starts rushing and flooding. The flooding has happening downstream, so, and it's just kind of, well, how does that work? And I know that there's less and less space in some of those parcels where you are right on the river, and getting 75 feet away from it might not leave you with any property left. So you're just kind of out of luck.
And I think, yeah, gets into another realm of conversation. I will say that I hope that people do their homework when they buy properties.
Right.
And I don't have any, we haven't had any hand in shaping where the flood zones lie. That's what,
Right.
like the scientists and the climatologists and the
That's what the
river folks
state's job, right?
do
Is
that,
the state
and,
dictates what the flood zones are
you know,
around here for, or, the-
FEMA,
yeah, so they take care of that. That's not necessarily the zoning board's job. the
right,
zoning
but we
commission's
have
job.
now,
No,
we've
but it-
incorporated, we kind of updated.
Mhm.
They've been widened, that's what's
Okay.
different, so,
I don't think there are any big surprises in those maps, though. I don't think it radically changes.
no, I guess it was easier to read it in color. These
Yes,
are
let's-
black and white,
let's
not doing
question.
anything for me.
The question is, how does this relate to
The
What?
revised, like, river
Revised
corridor
corridor,
maps.
which that you wouldn't be able to build in the flood
Yeah.
zone?
75 feet
Yeah.
from the high water mark on any river. And that's all 7 major year-round rivers. So just for funsies, I read them, now can I find them again to read them again?
Those aren't like radically new. I mean, there were
No.
lots of limits. The 75-foot limit was there before this amendment in a lot of places.
You're just, so,
And that's already, the town already owns that amendment. Like, that was adopted in
Yeah.
2023. It was like very confusing because it was in a separate document and it's actually
Yeah.
quite a lot of work to
Yeah.
renumber everything.
so we
Um,
basically
Sorry,
got
that's
everything
like
in
a
one
wrong- yeah,
package.
That's okay. I just want to look at the color
Done
version.
only a few
I can't see
changes, and I think this should go forward as soon as possible.
I will say, we are in the process of working on the town plan. We're starting our first community meeting this Thursday, and it would be awesome, like really constructive and helpful if you all, and if your neighbors and, you know, people who might be on Zoom if they were here, like come and add your input then, because we're gonna build that into the next town plan, and once language is in the town plan, it's how we justify the zoning bylaw changes and how the town can apply for grants and like a million other things, but these questions, like Katie, your question is a great one to come, I know you have a lot of meetings, but bring that to the town plan discussions, cause that's where we, like,
Now,
we wanna get everyone's input and we will keep track of it and
The
incorporate.
town plan is where I was referring to before, and you said that's not what we're
No.
talking about.
That, the town plan is,
Oh, I know what the town plan is, yeah,
okay.
sorry, forget it. So how do you refer to the plan that has been brought up here this year about getting people to be able to rent an apartment or a home where the ARPA money was supposed to go to?
What do I think about that program?
I mean,
Yeah.
when are you going, aren't we supposed to vote on that?
I mean, the
Approve
town
it?
adopted that last year. The town took it on and adopted it and like the lawyers approved it and the forms were published, so that should,
We just haven't had any takers.
yeah, and I think that it's potentially really beneficial and we put a lot of thought into designing a program that like, to the extent the town has money to invest in housing, it would be investing in people who own property here already, rather than creating an incentive or inviting an
Right.
outside developer to come in. So I know like that was part of the design, like reinvest in the community while creating housing. It's not enough money to build a place from scratch, but it's just kind of an incentive, like for people who maybe have a short-term rental and they're considering bringing it back to a permanent rental. Maybe it's like just an incentive to do that. So I don't know, I know there were some questions on the select board about that, but the town did adopt it and it was vetted by the lawyers and discussed at length with the zoning administrator and the DRB like before that. I will say I'm happy to talk to you about that more. I'm a little mindful of, I
No,
have to
you
get on
have to go.
at Townsend.
Yeah.
But thank you all, and don't hesitate, Jane and Nolan know this stuff well, as do Bob and James, who are not here. But keep the comments coming, it's really helpful
So
to.
our next meeting with the planning commission about this is on July 14th?
We have you all I think are voting on this. I think tonight you have to like vote to move it forward to a vote, right?
Tonight we're
Or
gonna-
no,
No
nothing tonight?
voting.
No voting
It's a different
tonight.
meeting.
Oh, okay.
There's
Different
no
meeting, my
voting.
bad.
So this, we'll schedule this for the next meeting, where we will do the vote to move forward
Just
for
do
the-
it.
To adopt,
to adopt.
to adopt.
In the meantime, we are meeting here, we're using our regular planning commission meeting time this Thursday to have kind of a community meeting for folks to bring their input on the topics we are aiming to cover are transportation, energy, and natural resources, which overlaps a bit with the flood resilience. And we are gonna be a little flexible, see how we go, how much we cover, and we can schedule more meetings to hear folks'
That's
thoughts.
Thursday the 12th,
Thursday the 12th.
okay?
And we have another definite community meeting scheduled for Saturday, July 19th. You're about to be flooded with postcards and flyers and electronic invitations to all of those meetings. But to the extent you can participate, that would be really great.
Well, thank you very much for giving us your time and coming in and clearing up some
Thank
of
you
this.
very much.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Do you have anything you would like to say or add?
No, I think, I hope you don't mingle problems with these zoning bylaw changes with the town plan. They really are separate documents, so.
Yeah, the town plan.
Yeah, the
I
town
understand.
plan is a
Yeah, I
separate
was
document.
thinking
Yeah,
more so about.
and the grant program is a separate document too, so,
That's what I was thinking.
you know.
Our understanding, mine, Todd's, and I don't know who else, that we were going to be talking about that part tonight.
Hmm.
No, it's really not.
No.
Luckily, I was
Not
clueless
part
enough
of
not to pick up on that, so.
It's
What's
adjacent,
I
but
said, luckily, I was
Yeah.
clueless enough not to pick up on that,
Thanks
so.
very much.
Thank you so much, Kate.
Okay, thank you very much, all of you, for being here.
Thank you.
Is there any other members of the public out there?
I don't believe that anybody wants to.
If there's nobody else who wants to speak about the Newfane bylaws, we're going to move on, and
I make a motion.
go ahead.
I would like to make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, I didn't vote.
Okay, the ayes have it, and this meeting is adjourned.
At 6:48.
the next one.
6:38 p.m.
6:48.
6:48.
6:48 p.m. The meeting is adjourned.
I would add over that if the general public sees this and wants to comment, they're free to write us, the select board, for their comments.
Carol.
Thank you.